Monday, April 21st, about 7:35 a.m. local time, Pope Francis passed away. Cardinal Camerlengo, Kevin Joseph Farrell, confirmed it.
Right. He's the interim administrator, basically. The official confirmation mentioned a stroke at the Domus Santa Marta.
Yeah. It's a huge moment. And to really understand what might come next, I think we need to look back a bit at his papacy. It was pretty remarkable.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, born back in 36 in Buenos Aires.
Right.
He was a pope of many firsts, wasn't he? First from the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
First to choose the name Francis, after St. Francis of Assisi.
And the first Jesuit pope. That's a big one, too.
Definitely. And over, roughly 14 years, his time wasn't just about keeping things steady. He really navigated some major crises and pushed through some significant reforms.
He certainly did. And he didn't seem to shy away from the really difficult stuff.
No.
Like the clerical abuse crisis. He seemed genuinely committed to addressing that, pushing for more accountability.
That was a defining challenge, for sure. And also his work on interreligious dialogue. That felt quite prominent.
It did. I remember Time magazine even highlighted his global leadership, during things like the pandemic, the wars in Ukraine and Israel.
Yeah. That recognition says a lot about his influence beyond just the Catholic Church. It speaks to his role as a global figure.
And that connects to his personal style, too, right? The emphasis on simplicity.
Absolutely. That's very much tied to his Jesuit background, I think. This preference for austerity.
Like his burial request, wanting it to be simple, no elaborate symbols, just to be remembered as Francis.
Exactly. That really sums up a lot about him.
It does. And you saw that same spirit in his push for a more inclusive church, maybe.
Well, yeah. He often spoke about the church being open to everyone. Made those comments about not denying access based on marital status or sexual orientation.
I remember he even criticized priests who wouldn't give communion to transgender people. That felt like a significant statement.
It certainly marked a shift in tone, at least publicly. And connecting that back to the global stage, he wasn't just inside the Vatican walls.
No, definitely not. Attending the G7, visiting places like Iraq, Bahrain.
Right. And that story about the Fiat 500 in Bahrain.
Oh, yeah.
Amidst all the, the expected luxury and protocol, he turns up in this tiny little car.
It's such a memorable image, isn't it? Really reinforces that message of humility.
It does. And even his personal wishes, wanting to be remembered simply as a servant of Mary, waiting for the resurrection.
There was that funny line, too, about Argentinians being seen as maybe a bit presumptuous.
Yeah. And the headline is calling him the most humble of Argentinians. A bit of playful irony there.
Right. It also connects to something he said early on, didn't he? Back in 2014.
Ah, yes. His prediction of a short papacy. Maybe 2 or 3 years, he thought.
And here we are almost 14 years later. It ended up being the second longest papacy, I believe.
That's right. Which, of course, brings us right back to the main question now.
Exactly. With Pope Francis gone, who comes next? And the speculation machine is already in high gear.
Naturally. And you hear terms thrown around like the idea of a black pope.
Right. What does that actually refer to in this context?
Well, traditionally, Black Pope is the nickname for the superior general of the Jesuits because of their black cassocks and global influence. Given Francis was the first Jesuit pope, the term pops up in discussions, but it's not an official category or anything for the papal election itself. Just adds another layer to the conversation, I suppose.
Got it. So not an official thing, just part of the chatter. Okay, so who are the names actually being floated as potential successors? The papabili, as they say.
Right. Well, several figures are consistently mentioned. Let's start perhaps with Cardinal Pietro Parolin.
The Italian, 70 years old. He's the current Secretary of State, right?
Exactly. A very powerful position. Essentially, the Vatican's prime minister and foreign minister rolled into one. He's seen as a skilled diplomat, very respected, a steady hand.
Okay, sounds like a strong candidate. Any potential downsides?
Well, there's a bit of historical precedent, or lack thereof. Secretaries of state haven't often been elected pope. It's kind of seen as too powerful a position beforehand, maybe, so tradition might work against him a little.
Interesting. Okay, who else?
Then you have Cardinal Peter Erdu from Hungary. He's 72.
Erdu, okay. What's his profile?
He's known as a more conservative voice, very strong on traditional moral teachings, though some observers feel his actual influence might have decreased a bit in recent years.
This is potentially a shift away from Francis's more inclusive tone if he were chosen.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
He represents a more traditionalist wing of the church.
All right. Another name I've seen mentioned is Cardinal Tagle.
Luis Antonio Tagle, yes. From the Philippines, he's 67.
relatively young then in papal terms.
Could be seen that way, yeah. If the cardinals are perhaps looking for a slightly shorter papacy after Francis's long one, his age might be a factor, though 67 isn't that young.
True. What are his strengths and weaknesses?
Strong pastoral profile, very popular, charismatic, but some question his, maybe his administrative experience at the very top level compared to someone like Parolin.
And he'd be the first Asian pope, right? That would be historic.
Absolutely. A huge moment for the church in Asia and globally. It would bring a very different perspective.
Definitely. Okay, who's next on the list?
How about Archbishop Matteo Zuppi? Another Italian, 69 years old.
Zuppi, what's his background?
He's seen as being quite close to Pope Francis ideologically. He's been involved in peace initiatives like in Ukraine and is known for promoting dialogue, including outreach to the LGBTQ plus community.
So more of a continuation candidate.
Possibly, yes. But because of that, he does face some opposition from the more conservative cardinals.
Right. But isn't the College of Cardinals now mostly appointed by Francis? More moderate?
That's the thinking, yes. Estimates suggest maybe 60, even up to 80% of the voting cardinals were appointed by Francis and might lean more moderate or aligned with his vision. So Zuppi could have significant support.
Okay. What about candidates from Africa? That's often discussed too.
Yes, definitely. Two names stand out there. Cardinal Fridolin Mbongo Basungu from the DRC, the Congo. He's 65.
And his stance?
Generally seen as more on the conservative side, he was quite vocal, for instance, in opposing the possibility of blessings for same-sex couples in Africa.
Okay. And the other African candidate?
That would be Bishop Peter Ebere Okpalik from Nigeria. He's younger, 62.
And his position?
He's known to have had strong backing from Pope Francis himself. Francis showed significant support for him during a difficult period in his ministry in Nigeria. That papal backing could carry weight with other cardinals.
I see. So two prominent African cardinals, potentially representing different wings of the church there. Anyone else we should mention?
One more, perhaps, Cardinal Charles Mongbo from Myanmar. He's a bit older, 76.
Myanmar. What's notable about him?
He's gained a lot of respect for his outspoken criticism of the military junta there. Especially given the Catholic population in Myanmar is quite small, his willingness to speak out has been seen as very courageous and principled.
So quite a diverse group, really. Different ages, different continents, different theological leanings.
Exactly. It makes the outcome of the conclave quite unpredictable.
Okay, let's talk about that conclave process itself. It's not like a regular election, is it? It's shrouded in secrecy.
Oh, absolutely. It's a unique process. You'll have 138 cardinals, all under 80 years old, who are eligible to vote.
And they're locked in?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
They gather in the Sistine Chapel for the voting, a closed conclave. No contact with the outside world.
Wow. And they just keep voting?
They do. Multiple ballots per day, usually, until one candidate secures a 2/3 majority.
2/3? That's a high bar.
It is. It ensures broad consensus. This whole process could take anywhere from a few days to, theoretically, up to 15 or 20 days.
And how do we know when they've succeeded?
That's the famous part, the smoke signal. Black smoke after inconclusive votes, white smoke when a new pope has been elected.
Right, the white smoke from the Sistine Chapel chimney. So, based on the timeline, we might expect a new pope by when? Mid to late May.
That seems like a reasonable time frame, yes. Allowing for the mourning period, the preparations, and the conclave itself.
And inside the Sistine Chapel.
It must be intense.
Immensely so. They take a solemn oath in Latin, promising absolute secrecy. Absolute secrecy.
About everything. The discussions, the votes.
Everything. The protocols are incredibly strict, even down to how the ballot papers are folded.
I read something about that, like if you fold it wrong.
Well, the theoretical penalty for breaking the secrecy rules, or even significant procedural errors, could technically be excommunication.
Excommunication? Seriously. For folding a piece of paper wrong.
It's highly, highly unlikely it would ever come to that for a simple mistake, of course. But it underscores the incredible gravity and the demand for total confidentiality they operate under.
Wow. And they really try to prevent any leaks, right? Like sweeping for bugs. Oh, yes. Before the conclave even starts, the Sistine Chapel and the Cardinals' quarters are meticulously swept for any kind of listening devices, recording equipment, anything that could compromise the secrecy.
They're really creating a bubble.
Exactly. The idea is to ensure the cardinals are completely free from external pressures or influences so they can focus solely on, as they believe, discerning the Holy Spirit's will for the next leader.
One interesting point you mentioned earlier, the person elected doesn't have to be one of those cardinals in the room, technically?
Technically, no. Canon law allows for any baptized Catholic male to be elected pope. They don't even need to be a priest or bishop at the time.
Really? So they could elect just some guy?
Theoretically, if a layman or just a priest were elected, he would have to accept, and then he'd be immediately ordained bishop right there and then.
Has that ever happened?
Historically, it's almost always been one of the cardinals present in the conclave. The last non-cardinal elected was centuries ago, so while possible, it's extremely unlikely. The focus will realistically be on the cardinals we discussed.
Okay, that makes sense. It's a fascinating process, steeped in tradition and secrecy.
It really is.
All right, so we've got the passing of Pope Francis and the upcoming election. But there was another piece of significant news from the Vatican recently involving someone quite different.
Ah, yes. The decree concerning Antonio Gaudí.
The architect. The Catalan architect. What's the news there?
Pope Francis, shortly before his passing actually, authorized the decree for Gaudí's beatification.
Beatification. So making him blessed, one step below sainthood.
Exactly. He was already declared venerable, which recognized his heroic virtue. Now, beatification is the next major step. It means he can be publicly venerated, especially in certain regions or groups.
Wow. Gaudí. He's known for, well, the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, obviously. Amazing, unique architecture.
Absolutely. A true genius. His work is so distinctive, so organic, drawing so much inspiration from nature, and he was known to be a very devout man. His faith deeply informed his work.
People see his architecture as almost a form of prayer, right?
Many do, yes. It's seen as profoundly spiritual. There are stories about his intense dedication, how he poured everything into his work.
I remember reading he barely ate sometimes, just carried nets around because he was so focused.
Anecdotes like that highlight his single-minded devotion, to both his faith and his craft.
So beatification now. Could he eventually become a saint, Saint Antonio Gaudí?
That's the next potential step, canonization. If he were canonized, he could potentially become the patron saint of architects.
The patron saint of architects.
Yeah.
That would be something. It feels like a recognition of creativity as a path to holiness, maybe.
I think that's a fair interpretation. It acknowledges the deep spiritual dimension that can be present in art and architecture and creative work. It's quite a statement.
Especially with his masterpiece, the Sagrada Familia, finally nearing completion after all this time. It feels timely.
It does add a certain resonance, doesn't it?
I actually climbed one of the towers there years ago. It was incredible. So narrow, winding, almost mysterious inside.
It's an experience unlike any other building, really.
Definitely. And his other work too, Parguel, Casa Badlo, it's all so unique, almost otherworldly. Really ahead of its time. If you're listening and don't know Gaudí's work, definitely look it up.
Agreed. Visionary stuff. So, yeah, we're in this really interesting moment.
We really are. Two major threads unfolding. The end of an era with Pope Francis's passing and the whole process of choosing his successor kicking off.
A pivotal transition for the leadership and direction of the Catholic Church. Huge historical significance there.
And at the same time, this recognition of Antonio Gaudí, a figure who blended faith and, well, groundbreaking artistic innovation in such a unique way.
Right. It connects faith to creativity, to culture in a very tangible way. It also feels historically significant recognizing that kind of contribution.
So it leaves us with a lot to think about, doesn't it, as we watch the Conclave news unfold. Thinking about those potential candidates we discussed, Parolin, Erdo, Tagle, Zuppi, the African Cardinals, Bo, all with different backgrounds, different priorities.
And considering the legacy Pope Francis leaves behind, particularly his reforms and his emphasis on outreach,
it makes you wonder what qualities are really needed now. What's most crucial for the next pope leading the church in, well, the pretty complex world we're in? That's something for our listeners to ponder, maybe.
Definitely a key question. And perhaps also, what does the beatification of someone like Gaudí signal? Does it suggest maybe broader shifts in how the church engages with art, with culture, with innovation?
Interesting angle, how faith intersects with the modern world in different ways.
Exactly. So plenty to keep an eye on, the papal conclave updates, obviously.
Right.
And maybe take another look at Gaudí's life and work. It's a fascinating story at the intersection of all these themes, faith, art, history.
Absolutely. Lots to follow, lots to reflect on.